Volume 2, Letter 14. From Clement Montgomery to Arthur Murden. Mr. Valmont, dear Arthur, has sent me to London with £500 in my pocket to choose a profession. "Be not rash nor hasty in your determination, Clement," said he when we parted. "Associate with such persons as have already made their choice, and have from practice, from success or disappointment, learned the exact value of their several professions. But associate with them as an independent man, one who seeks a variety of knowledge rather from inclination than necessity, and under these appearances, Clement, they will court you to receive their confidence. Even their envy of your independence will increase the freedom of their communications." And do you dream, Arthur, that I am practising these grave maxims, and hearkening to the jargon of law, physic, and divinity? No, indeed, not I. The variety of knowledge I seek is variety in pleasures. My teachers are divinities whose oracles, more precious than wisdom, can lead the senses captive and enchain the will. "Be secret," said Mr. Valmont. "Most readily can I be secret. I would have it remain a profound and everlasting secret, never to interrupt the delicious enjoyments which now again hover within my reach, which I must seize on. I have not the cold ability to chase from me the present smiling hour of offered delight, because a future hour may frown. Pleasure beckons, and I follow. I tread the mazy round of her varieties. Youth, vigour, and fancy conduct me to her shrine, the most indefatigable of her votaries. Alike I abjure retrospect and foreboding. As long as I can find means, will I elude the horrible change, and if the fatal hour of darkness must arrive, why, Arthur, it is but to exert a little manhood, it is but to remember that all the charms of life are passed by, and boldly to plunge into everlasting darkness. Imagine not, dear Arthur, by that doleful conclusion, that I at all dread the possibility of its arrival. For, on the contrary, I believe my dismission is a mere farce, a something with Mr. Valmont to vary, project, and prolong inconsistency. I have compared his letters and his speeches, combined circumstances, and find them, though so various and contradictory, yet full of hope and promise. One cause of dread indeed will assail me. I dread the rashness of Sibella. Could you suppose, Murden, that she has even talked of explaining the nature of our intimacy to her uncle, and of quitting his castle? Was ever anything so violent, so absurd, so pregnant with evil as this scheme? When I had read her letter, I thought every chair in my apartment was stuffed with thorns. Nay, I endured for a time the torments of the rack. Thank heaven, Miss Ashburn adopted my sense of the extravagant proposition, undertook to dissuade Sibella, and restored me once more to gaiety, courage, and happiness. Yes, Arthur, established in my former lodgings, courted, surrounded, congratulated by my former friends, I want but your society and the embraces of my divine girl to be the happiest of the happy. Thanks, Murden, for your silence on the subject of Mr. Valmont's threatened disposal of me. I am everywhere received like my former self. Oh, had I met one repulsive look or supercilious brow with your servant Mr. Montgomery, I surely should have run mad. Miss Ashburn knows it all, and I hate her most righteously. I allow that she is a fine woman, but her beauty is spoiled by her discernment. I wish Mr. Valmont would refuse Sibella Miss Ashburn's correspondence. The dear girl is already too eccentric. Yet could I now gaze on that lovely face, Could I now clasp that enchanting, unresisting form to my bosom? Had she 10,000 faults, I should swear they were all perfections. Murden, you never saw any one who can equal Sibella Valmont. Her charms cannot pall in possession. Ever a source of new desire, of fresh delight, adoration must ever be her lover's tribute. Arthur, I will make her my wife. Whom would you suppose I have, to my very great astonishment, found here in Mrs. Ashburn's family? No other than Janetta Laundy. I first saw her at the opera, where I overlooked her with the most studied neglect. She quitted the party abruptly, and then the Duchess de N informed me of the cruel reverse of fortune in the Laundy family. Janetta, with so much beauty, she, who lately shone conspicuous in fashion, taste, and elegance, is now absolutely reduced to the mortifying state of a humble companion. Upon my soul, I was shocked, and notwithstanding certain recollections, I could not help feeling a strong degree of interest and pity for her. A brilliant party whom we joined at the supper table of your uncle Sir Thomas Barlow banished Janetta and her misfortunes from my thoughts, but as I was stepping into a chair to return home after I had handed the Duchess and Mrs. Ashburn to their carriages, a man put a letter into my hand. The letter was from Janetta, written in the true spirit of complaint and fondness. She implored that I would see her, asserted her innocence with respect to the Duc de N, and, recollecting the continued attachment of the Duchess to her, I was inclined to doubt the evidence of my senses, and half resolved to give her an opportunity of justifying herself. Again the circumstances came rushing into my memory, and brought conviction with them. I determined to contemn and despise her, and steadily to refuse the interview. She spared me the trouble, for on the next morning, while I was dressing to dine at Mrs. Ashburn's, a second letter was given me, in which Janetta, with mingled love and resentment, bids me a final adieu. At Mrs. Ashburn's table, Janetta Laundy had no rival in beauty. She enforced the homage of many eyes, but she received it with so graceful a reserve that those who would otherwise have been jealous of her attractions were irresistibly impelled to own her worthy of admiration. Toward me her countenance expressed nothing but a frigid restraint. Once I approached her seat, and she found an immediate pretence for withdrawing, and, shall I confess it to you, Arthur, I was in a small degree mortified. It has not been merely 1 day, or 2 or 3, that Janetta has upheld her determination. I have been astonished at her inflexibility and perseverance. I have almost doubted that she could really love me and be so firm. Scarce a day passes in which we are not together, for Mr. Ashburn is extravagantly fond of Janetta, and never moves without her. Mrs. Ashburn selects her parties as I best approve, and consults me on all her engagements. I attend her everywhere, and thus Janetta and I are frequently in the same apartment, in the same carriage, side by side, and, considering former circumstances, you will not imagine these can be very desirable situations. It occurred to me one morning that I ought in justice to make Janetta a present, notwithstanding her allowance from Mrs. Ashburn is really splendid. Accordingly, I sent her a £50 note, enclosed in a letter, written, as I think, with delicacy and propriety. The note was accepted, but the letter remained unanswered. 2 evenings after this, we were at Ranelagh, where Mrs. Ashburn, joining the Ulson family, Janetta and I walked a round or 2 alone. She then, with more coldness than I could have thought possible, thanked me for my present, and hoped my generosity would prove no inconvenience under the alteration of my affairs. By heaven, Arthur, her speech was a thunderbolt. I was dumb for the space of many minutes, and then, stammering, incoherent, blushing with shame and anger, I protested her meaning was an enigma that I could not unravel. Hanway at that instant came up, and every opportunity of further conversation was at an end. And how do you suppose I aimed to settle the business? To prevent the cruel supposition from being whispered from one to another around the circles of my friends? Thus I did it. I took another bank-note of £50, and wrote another card, in which I alleged that I could only understand Mademoiselle Laundy's hint as a reproof for the smallness of the sum I had before sent her, and entreated she would now receive this as an atonement. I acknowledged the whole was scarcely worthy her acceptance, but I hoped she would consider I had less at command than in expectation. I added my fervent wishes for her happiness, but said not one word of love. Still I have no answer. How wantonly cruel it is of Miss Ashburn to throw me thus in the way of torment and contempt. No one but herself could have told Janetta of the alteration in my affairs. 'Tis false. There is no alteration. For have I not £400 in my possession? Where are you, and what are you doing, Arthur? By heaven, I never think of you without astonishment. You, whom fortune favours, you so highly gifted to charm, to be sacrificing the age of delights in a barbarous solitude, what upon earth can be your inducement? Your uncle pines for you. Certainly you must be either immoderately sure of your power over him, or desperately careless of your interest. All who concern themselves in your fate apply to me for the explanation of your mysterious conduct, and, finding I am no more informed than themselves, they tease me with their conjectures. Come, Arthur, come, banish melancholy in misanthropy till age shall have cramped your vigour and palsied your faculties. Then cast your dim sight upon the flying pleasures which you are no longer able to pursue, and rail, and be welcome. But now, while the power is yours, hasten to partake, to enjoy. The wealth of a nabob gilds the path before you. Beauty spreads her allurements for you. Come, insensible, marble-hearted as you are, to the enticements of beauty. At least come to interest, if you cannot be interested. Excite the sigh, the languor, which you will not return. Be again as formidable as you once were, and let the meaner candidates who triumph in your absence sink back to insignificance and neglect. Does not the prospect fire you? I know it does, or you are unfit to be the friend of Clement Montgomery. End of section 31.